You know, the funny thing about real life, in real life, not every day is a good day. You're going to have a few that suck along the way. And I would suggest that this is probably one of those. Hasn't been my favorite day, I've got to be honest. I've had a lot of days over the last 2 years that have not made my top 10, and I can add this one to a long and growing list. But it's also not the end of the world. When you think it through, we've achieved some incredible things, and we've laid the groundwork for some amazing things yet to come. And so that's really what I want to talk about tonight. I want to talk about what we have achieved, because it can be very easy for us to go, oh, well, it was all for nothing then. No, 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 no. Hold your horses. Not so fast. We've achieved a hell of a lot. And we're still making history. We're still making history here. Daniel Andrews got what he wanted. That's not a huge surprise. Yes, I allowed myself to hope when Adam came in like a zombie wrecking ball. I allowed myself to dare to hope that maybe he wasn't going to get his enabling act. But you know what? He did. He did. Okay. That's not the end of the world. We're still here. We're still fighting. He didn't get what he wanted. He didn't get all the legislation as he wanted it to be. There were a number of amendments that did go through, and I'm having to rely on people smarter than me to decode that, and I'll learn over the next few days exactly what did and didn't make it through. There's a few key things I will be talking about tonight, but there's a lot of it that I'm just going to have to allow other people that have the time and the IQ to really go through it and decode it and explain it, and then I will pass on to you what they have to say about it. But you know what? Someone's got Dimple. There you go. Dimple 15. I've got the 12 behind me as well, but I'm smoking quite a nice cigar tonight. It's one of my. I bought 2 boxes of these. One in the Perfecto, and the other in the Churchill. So I thought, nice cigar. I'll go for my slightly nicer scotch. All right. So we've got a bit of ground to cover. And then, of course, I want to stick around and have a bit of a Q&A and a chat with you guys and help you to sort of debrief and process, just as I am using tonight to debrief and process. This is what it's about. This is how I do it. And every single time I do it, there's always someone, oh, what's with the cigar? This is how I de-stress. Okay. So I'm going to smoke a cigar. I'm going to drink some whiskey. Yes, I'm doing it publicly. I had someone send me an email, topher@topherfield.net, if you ever want to email me, by the way. Sent me an email saying, oh, look, I love what you do, but, what's with the cigars and the scotch? And, you're setting a really bad example, blah, blah, blah. And let me put it to you this way. I'm a dad. I've got a 5-year-old boy and a 1-year-old daughter. I want to show them how alcohol can be used in context for good. Okay, I'm not going to be a teetotaler and not let them see alcohol, not let them see it being consumed appropriately. I want them to actually see the context that it can have in your life and how it can be a beneficial thing. And then they can decide what they want to do from there. I'm not going to hide it from them, because then what happens when they're 14, 15, 16, they just desperately want to know about this alcohol thing, and they're going to get taught by somebody else. Now, these are fantastic for my mental health. And on a day like today, these are fantastic for my mental health. And so again, it's about giving my children a context in which they can see these things. So these this Puritan instinct that some people have, oh, you can't let anyone see that. Well, no, hang on. Let's actually, you can do it that way if you want to, that's fine. But I'm actually going to enjoy these things that are God's gifts, as far as I'm concerned, use them in an appropriate way in my life, and let my children see that and see that example. Okay. So I'm going to light up a cigar. It is an Oliva V Milanio in the Double Perfecto Figurado. They have different people would call this Vitola different things. This is the cigar that won the Cigar of the Year, and I think it was 2015. Good. And we are lit. All right, let me get my notes. Okay, today is a heavy day. Look, it is a heavy day. No doubt about that. And if you're feeling heavy, don't judge yourself for that. Like that's appropriate. It's a heavy day, but all is not lost. So what we need to be doing is thinking about how we individually regroup refocus, recharge. A lot of us, and I'm sure many of you watching, have given a lot to this fight. And to see this particular chapter, this particular battle end in this particular way can be pretty dispiriting. And we shouldn't be judging ourselves for feeling that way, right? Or for feeling tired, for feeling run down, for wondering whether it was worth it even. That's not something you should be judging yourself for. Those are valid and fair questions to be asking yourself at a moment like this. So rather than just charging on blindly and, once more to the breach, dear friends, let's take stock for a minute, because I think if we actually step back a little bit and take stock of particularly the last couple of months, things might not be as grim as they may seem right now. The other thing I like about these cigars is they roll lots of smoke rings into them. So when you smoke them, you get lots of really good smoke rings. It's nice. So Jordan is asking, what now is what I'm most worried about. We'll get there. Don't you worry. We'll get there. So tonight, I've got a couple of special things for you tonight. I'm actually going to talk about the Doco at the end. Got some news in relation to the launch date. The reality is we won't be able to do an in-person premiere. We were hoping to book out the Astor Theatre and do an 800-person in-person premiere there. But I don't expect we'll have the opportunity to do that because I expect there'll be restrictions and all that sort of stuff in place. But what I've got for you tonight, we have finished one of the songs that has been written specially for the documentary, and an amazing artist by the name of Irwin Thomas, otherwise known as Jack Jones, collaborated with Peter Reggie Bowman, and they wrote it, and Irwin performed it. It's absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to play that for you a little bit later on tonight. That's going to be our toilet break. No offense, Jack and Reggie, but that's how we'll punctuate this particular slow chat. And I'll also be talking about just a little bit more about the Doco. There is a website. Actually, let's do this now. There is a website where you can now sign up. I'm going to paste this into the comments, so it should pop up in both Facebook. Oh, there we go. Irwin's here. Perfect. It's perfect toilet break music, says Irwin Thomas, who wrote the song and performs it, or co-wrote the song and performs it, and it's freaking amazing. So battlegroundmelbourne.com, this is where you can go right now. It's just a splash page. You can drop your email address in there and you will get all the notifications as we approach launch. And that will make sure that you actually see it first, basically, that you're right there when it launches and you're among the very first people. I agree, Julie. So speaking of which, okay, so you're going to hear it tonight. But if you want to cheat, do I do this? Because I'm stealing my own thunder here. But Julie, I agree. So I'm going to do this. Go to Jack Jones's Bandcamp. Do I do it? Yes, I'm going to do it because Irwin did such a phenomenal job on this song and he deserves phenomenal credit. And I want nothing more than for this song to go absolutely freaking nuts. So this is Jack Jones's Bandcamp. Go there. The track, /track/rise up, rise-up. That is the name of the track, Rise Up. Freaking phenomenal. I will repost that again at the end. So maybe don't all leave my slow chat and go and do that instead. Maybe stick around. I will repost that at the end. Okay. So we're going to hear that a little bit later on. And I got some news around the Doco and all that sort of stuff as well. But first, let's take stock. Before we talk about what's next, let's actually take stock of what has been, of what's happened up to this moment in time. Because I think we've achieved a lot. If we're actually honest with ourselves, I think we've achieved a hell of a lot. When you feel like you're taking a backward step, when you feel like you're losing the battle, okay, let's not put it in military terms. Let's say a game of rugby, right? Playing a game of rugby union, because it's better than league, and you're being pushed backwards, right? It can feel like maybe, what's the point? Why am I even, yes, Diana, it is. Why am I even bothering to fight here? We're just losing ground and pushing backwards anyway. But what happens if you stop fighting? The minute you stop pushing back, you lose a heap more ground and it goes even further against you. So we've achieved a lot in a lot of ways, but we just need to look at it the right way. Can I remind you, and I know I say it a lot, but this is something I remind myself of often because it gives me perspective. Can I remind you that we started in April on April 25th, 2020, with 70 people. By the end of 2020, we had a few thousand, and we were regularly getting beaten up by the cops. By the middle of 2021, we were sometimes topping, 10,000. And the violence from the police was just escalating further and further and further until eventually they rolled out the riot squad and dispersed the protests, and mass protests became non-viable for a while. That's where we were. And then all of a sudden, we were able to start putting together protests of 50,000 people. And that was amazing. Like, do you remember when the pictures of 50,000 people came out? And we're all arguing over, was it 20,000? Was it 30,000? Was it 50,000? How many was it really? Did we break 100,000? And then all of a sudden, we had that rally on the 20th of November. And no one can reasonably argue there were less than 100,000 there. You look at the photos, you look at the drone footage, you look at the time-lapse footage of the marchers going past the cameras. No one can reasonably argue that there were less than 100,000. I think there were a couple of 100,000 people there. Then we did it again on the 27th. The march was probably just about as big, and not everyone stayed in the park. So the park itself ended up being a smaller event, in my opinion, than the week before, but the march was still massive. We put on 2 record-breaking marches in a row, one weekend apart from each other. Now, what did that achieve? People say to me all the time, "Oh, you've been protesting all this stuff. What have you achieved? What have you done?" Well, think about it. I'll pose this question to you. Would Adam Somyurek have done what he did if it weren't for the hue and cry, if it weren't for the size of the protest, the number of people, the ruckus that we were raising? Or is it more likely that he actually would have just stayed quiet, stayed in his corner, not been showing up to Parliament, not sticking his neck out? Right? How much of an effect did what we were doing have on what Adam then went on to do? Right? And let's not forget that it's not over with Adam. He's made it very clear today and yesterday that he's now back in the chamber and he's voting again. And he doesn't like the Labor Party. And after the way they've treated him, I don't blame them. So now, whereas previously Daniel Andrews has only needed 3 crossbenchers to get everything done, he now needs 4 every single time. Now, he managed to get 4 this time. That's not a guarantee he'll get 4 every single time, right? So Adam Somyurek coming back into the fight, probably largely thanks to us, is not a bad thing, and is something that we can, claim a little bit of credit for. 100%. The protests have moved the needle. 100%. So we've also made it a dogfight in the upper house. It got through, but by the narrowest possible margin. Now, to me, that makes a massive statement, because the opinion polls are showing, supposedly, that Daniel Andrews has 2/3 support, and 75% of Victorians support mandatory jabs in the workplace. All kinds of numbers that I don't personally find credible. Now, the interesting thing is, if those numbers were true, and if the opposition found them to be credible, they wouldn't be digging in like this. Because to take the side of the 25%, when you're a major political party, to take the side of the 25%, supposedly, or the less than 10% that remain unjabbed, they're just a couple of fringe dwellers. If the Liberal Party thought that was true, they would not be risking their necks standing up to this legislation and putting the 90% offside, right? Their actions tell us very clearly that they don't believe those numbers. They think that this is actually a winning strategy for them politically. The Liberal Party were a disgrace, and still are, in my opinion. They'll never recover from their absolute spinelessness over the last year and a half. But in the last 2 months, 3 months, we've started to see a few of them stand up and actually start to make some noise. Would that have happened were it not for the protests? Were it not for the noise that we were making? We had to lay the groundwork that they then stood up on. That's not the way it should be, but it's the way it has been. So we have moved the needle in all of these different ways, and we have changed the political landscape in all of these different ways. Now, what we wanted that to translate into, of course, was defeating this piece of legislation. That's what we wanted, right? We wanted to keep it so that Daniel Andrews never got his permanent pandemic powers, and that we had a Freedom Day on December the 16th. That's what we were aiming for. That's what we were shooting for. We didn't get it. That's a fact. We didn't get it, right? And you're allowed to feel disappointed about that. You know, you're allowed to be, you know, a footy player goes into the grand final and doesn't win it. Yeah, you're allowed to be pretty disappointed about that. You're allowed to be pretty deflated. But it doesn't mean you hang up the boots and you never hit the footy field again. It doesn't mean you give up the fight. And that's what has to come next. So what have we achieved? I think we've achieved quite a lot. It hasn't translated into victory yet. But remember what I've said all the way through. The facade of strength that someone like Daniel Andrews builds around himself crumbles quite suddenly. When it happens very quickly. Now, I don't know when it's going to happen, but when it does happen, it happens very, very quickly. He is going to be winning all the way up until about a week before he's lost. That's how this works. He'll be winning. He'll be in absolute power. He'll have absolutely everything under control. And then all of a sudden, a week later, he'll be out on his ear. That's how politics works. That's how the fall of a leader like Daniel Andrews works. So, from our perspective, the upcoming elections just became more important than ever. And I get a lot of people asking me, are the elections even going to happen? He won't allow the elections. He won't allow the unjabbed to vote. Well, there's a couple of pieces of information that I think have been missing from the public discourse on this particular topic. And I'll bring up something from Emily from Voice for Victoria in a minute, because she's been as she always is, a really good source of information. Firstly, will the election happen? Yes, it will. In Victoria, our election schedule is actually in the Constitution. It's not something that elected MPs can override. So he doesn't have a choice. And if he chooses not to hold an election, he creates a constitutional crisis and creates very good grounds for him to be dismissed. It doesn't completely mean that he can't try, but it makes it very difficult for him to try. And given the absolute dogfight that we've just given him over this pandemic legislation, we've had, let's not forget, the Law Institute of Victoria coming out on our side. We've had 30 QCs coming out on our side. We've had a number of other reputable bodies coming out on our side on this particular fight. If he tried to pull a stunt like that, and we had, you know, we were building on the momentum that we've already got, you can imagine it's going to be very politically expensive for him. He's going to have a real fight in his hands. So I don't expect that to happen. I think there will be an election as scheduled. I just can't see him trying to pull a stunt like that, because I think that would be such an admission of weakness. He wants the world to believe that he is loved and he is strong and his lead is unassailable, and we all want him to be our leader, our dear leader. And I use that expression deliberately. So, will an election happen? Almost certainly, yes. The next big question is, will the unvaccinated be able to actually vote in person? And this is where I want to refer to Emily's work. I'm just going to, oops, for later. So this is Voice for Victoria. Emily does a fantastic job. She has been, I cannot imagine what her mental state must be right now. It must have just been the most hellish couple of days. She was in Parliament tweeting relentlessly the whole time. Actually, I don't know if she was there in person. She might have been watching the live stream. I'm actually not sure. But she was watching the whole time at the very least. And gosh, I can't do that. Like, it does my head in to watch these people who are supposedly meant to be some of the best among us behaving the way they behave. Just does my head in. So she had to be there. And she was tweeting relentlessly. I really recommend, if you're on Twitter, go to Voice of Victoria, subscribe. She does amazing work. So Bernie Finn, has asked the question clearly that does the legislation allow the government to stop people voting in person at the election? And Symes says a straight no. Then Finn goes on to say, what's so safe about polling booths versus the cinema then? And he's really hammering down on this point. So Bernie Finn asked an important question that a lot of us have been wondering. Are they giving themselves the power to lock some people out of an election? And he gets a straight no. Now, this is fairly important, and I tried to find the specific exchange, and apologies, Emily, I wasn't able to find it. But from my recollection, someone queried Emily, Voice of Victoria, and said, oh, yeah, sure, they say that for now. And Emily made the reply that the fact that they've said no in Parliament in question time as a reply to the people that are voting on the legislation puts them in a position where they really can't. They can't go ahead and actually try and use it for that purpose. But there's a final point here, and that is, will an election happen? Will it be a fair election? Will unvaccinated people be allowed the same access to polling booths, etc.? I don't know for sure. I'm pretty sure that it will, but I don't know that for an absolute fact. But if we don't prepare for a world in which that election happens, then we've lost already, right? We either choose to be ready for it and deal with whatever comes our way as it comes our way. And can you imagine, look at the stink we already kicked up over this bill. The stink that we can kick up if they try to exclude people out of the democratic process now based on their vaccination status. We are more organized than ever before. We are communicating better than ever before. We are finding each other more than ever before. We can create a pretty big stink, right? If he tries to pull a stunt like that. So I think there is a very high probability that there will absolutely be an election and that the unvaccinated will be able to vote. Will they be able to be scrutineers? Will they be able to stand there and hand out party polling material? That's less clear in my mind. He might want to play with that a little bit more. But I would be surprised if he tried to play with our access to the polling booths. That would scream dictator. And his whole narrative is he doesn't need to do any of that. He's popular. Everybody loves him. And I think he actually believes that. So I think he's going to go into this election. He's not going to try any stunts like that because that would draw the wrong kind of attention to himself. But regardless, we need to prepare as though we are having an election, and we need to be ready, because if we're not, then it doesn't matter what he does. We've lost. Now, I see a lot of comments. There's one right now. Democracy is garbage. It's the reason we're in this crap. I see other people, sort of saying, oh, voting is part of the problem. If you're voting, you're just a part of the problem. You're just perpetuating the system. Okay, guys. Then what else? Because here's a hard bit of truth for you. You might be sitting there thinking, oh, we need to march on the Capitol and, I don't know, throw the government out and you have French Revolution style. Well, it's going to be you and about 10 of your mates. You're going to get immediately shut down by the police, and so you should be. Right? You're going to go to jail for a very long time. We're not there yet. We're not at the point where that's a proportionate response yet. Now, that might sound unbelievable, but I genuinely believe that to be true. We are not there yet. It's possible for any civilization, any culture to get there, but that's not where we are. So could he call an early election? Not at the state level, because the elections are scheduled in the Constitution itself. So to turn around and tell those that are trying to do what they can do within the confines of the system that they shouldn't bother, to me, strikes me as counterproductive, defeatist. I don't think it helps anyone in any way, to be honest. Because I've yet to have any of those people who say, oh, don't bother, you're perpetuating the system, actually present to me a viable plan for doing and creating any other meaningful change. Oh, we should all just hold a strike. Everyone should stop working. And all it would take is for a week or a month or whatever. Okay, great. What percentage of compliance do you think you're going to get with that plan? Right? I could throw my voice behind that plan. I could get a couple of other influencers, throw our voices behind that plan. You know how many people are actually going to stop working? A couple of hundred, maybe a couple of thousand, right? Because people need money. They've got bills to pay. They've got kids to feed, right? People keep coming at me with these outlandish ideas. Listen, the best option we have right now is to use the system that is in place against the people that are right now using it against us. And that's what these next two elections are about. It's about us seizing hold of that system and using it in the way that best serves us. That's the whole point of democracy, is that the people get to control the system. The problem is that we've been too apathetic. We've been too lazy. We've been ignoring it. Now's the time to change that. Now, let me jump back to my notes. Okay. We must plan for an election, and if we don't, we fail no matter what. So the first of the two elections are the federal one. That's coming up somewhere most likely between March and May next year. April is sort of the hot tip for that next year. So federal elections, as distinct from Victorian state elections, federal elections aren't on a fixed schedule. There's rules around when they can happen, but the Prime Minister does get to choose within a range when it sort of happens. Whereas with the Victorian state elections, it is fixed, it's rigid, it's a set date. We know we know when they all are. So, federal election is first. That's a good thing, in my opinion. Firstly, because the federal election gives all of us a dry run practice for the state election. Getting votes at elections is actually a big part of it is actually about logistics and manpower. They're a relatively complicated thing to orchestrate, and an enormous amount of every party's resources goes into finding volunteers to stand on polling booths, to stuff letterboxes, to do all that stuff, and then scheduling them and organizing their transport and making sure that everyone is where they're supposed to be on election day and during the pre-polling period, so that they're there to hand out the how to vote cards, so that they're there, to talk to people and wearing the t-shirts and doing all the right things, because that has been shown in research time and time again to shift the vote by enough of a percentage that it matters a lot for a minor party. It matters for the major parties as well, but it matters a lot for the minor parties. So it is a massive ground game. It's about manpower. Yes, it's about money to a certain degree, but I don't have $100 million to throw at a campaign. And look, Clive Palmer threw an enormous amount of money at UAP last election, and in my opinion, didn't really see a lot for his money. It's not really about the money. The money helps, but you've got to have a good strategy, and you've got to have people on the ground and a really strong ground game. So, all right. During the federal election, we have to send a message, but it has to be the right message. If we simply send a message against ScoMo, Daniel Andrews is going to use that as proof that, hey, the Labor way is working, right? Now, I don't want ScoMo to win, and I don't want, what's his face, Labor guy. It's not Shorten anymore. There you go. That's how good he is at getting my attention. I don't want either of the major parties to win in their own right. I want a minority government. I'll talk about what that means in a minute. I've got some pictures for you to help sort of take you through that. But if what happens is there's a massive swing against ScoMo, Albanese, that's his name. Thank you, Scott. I see you just typed that in. A couple of Benjamin, others have typed that in. If we see a swing against Scott Morrison towards Anthony Albanese, Daniel Andrews is going to use that as proof that the Labor way is popular, that he's popular, that he's done that, right? So we need to see a swing against Scott Morrison. No doubt about that. The guy's been worse than useless, shutting borders, rendering citizenship basically worthless. I mean, the stuff he's done is disgusting. But we can't have those votes going to Anthony Albanese. We need those votes to be going to the minor parties to create as big a crossbench as we possibly can in both the Senate and the House of Representatives. So let me talk about that more. So I've got some pictures here for you. Now, I grabbed these off Wiki, and I don't actually know for a fact that they are up to date. So I'll talk about the Senate first. I believe that these are up to date. And so this is, I believe, an up-to-date image. Oh, actually, hang on. Let me just get rid of the frame. There we go. So I believe that this is an up-to-date image showing the state of the Australian Senate as it stands right now. Blue is the Liberal Party. Dark green is the Nationals Party. There we go. Light green are the Greens. Red are Labor. Orange here, the two that you can see. Now, I don't think you can see my cursor, so let me do this instead, because, yeah, you can see this. So the two orange here are One Nation. So that's Pauline Hanson and Malcolm Roberts. Then over here, we have three others whose names and parties I don't recall. So for simplicity, you can essentially think of Liberal and National as the same party. They're basically all blue, right? And in practical terms, most of the time you can think of the Reds and the bright Greens as the same party, Labor and the Greens. They're pretty much the same party. So what we have here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people that don't belong to either of the major parties. When people talk about a crossbench, this is what they're talking about. They're talking about the people whose party affiliation and whose voting lines are not necessarily able to be assumed. Now, to get legislation through, it has to pass through the lower house, this one, and then it gets taken to the upper house and it has to pass there as well. We'll get to the lower house in a minute, but the thing you need to know about the lower house is in order to form government, the Prime Minister has to already have a majority there. That's how they get to be the Prime Minister. That's how government is formed in the lower house. So anytime the government puts forward legislation, it's a pretty safe bet it's going to pass the lower house. So what happens then is it goes to the upper house, and this is where all the argy-bargy goes on. This is where the crossbench, if there is a situation where the crossbench holds the balance of power, by which I mean neither the Liberal Party with the support of the Nationals nor the Labor Party with the support of the Greens holds an outright majority. Now, this is what's happened in Victoria, the upper house in Victoria. Daniel Andrews holds a significant majority in the Victorian lower house. Now, this is the federal one, but just to illustrate, in the Victorian lower house, Daniel Andrews holds a huge majority. He does not have a majority in the upper house, and that's why he needed the support of the 3 crossbenchers to get these extensions to his state of emergency, and now needed a 4th crossbencher because of what Adam Somyurek did in order to get this latest permanent pandemic powers bill through. So the upper house, federally speaking, there is a balance of power issue where some of these crossbenchers are needed in order to pass legislation through the upper house. It's the same in Victoria and in the federal parliament as well. Those people have a tremendous amount of influence because they can look at a piece of legislation and say, okay, I see what you're trying to do here, but I have some concerns about these provisions. I think this goes too far, etc. If we make these changes, I'll support your legislation. I'll pass it. And when I was chatting with Malcolm Roberts, one of his frustrations as a crossbench senator is he often doesn't get any credit for the work that he does working with, for example, the Liberal Party, to improve their legislation. So they'll come to him and they'll say, listen, we want to pass this bill. It's going to get through the lower house. We need it to get through the Senate. Will you support the bill? And he'll push back on certain things and say, no, I'm not going to support this. I'm not going to support that, etc. They go and revise the bill, present it to the Senate, and then he votes in favor of it. And people just go, oh, you're just voting with the Liberal Party all the time. Well, yes, because that was at the end of conversations where they actually did the things that he required them to do in order to win his support. And that's the same for all the crossbenchers. They're all playing this game constantly. The government needs their support because they hold the balance of power, brings them legislation. They then argy-bargy for a while. And in a perfect world, that argy-bargy would be all about what's in the best interest of the Australian people, or in the case of the Victorian Parliament, the Victorian people. In the real world that we live in today, we see things happening like what we believe has happened with Rod Barton, where the deal that he made wasn't all about what was in the best interests of the Victorian people, but there are big question marks that have yet to be answered, and people wondering whether there was some other things going on there, whether perhaps they offered him something unrelated to the bill that made him happy. And so he supported the bill, perhaps without actually requiring it to be made as good as what he actually even necessarily believed it should himself, but he was offered enough of an incentive elsewhere. Now, I can't say whether that's true or not, but there are some very big question marks hanging over Rod Barton. And I bring this out to make this point. Having a crossbench is not good enough. You need to have the right people in that crossbench. We need to create a situation when neither the Labor Greens nor the Liberal Nationals have an outright majority in the upper house. They have to negotiate with the crossbench, but we need to stack that crossbench with good people who are going to use their position of power and influence to improve the quality of legislation, not to feather their own nest or do other things which may or may not have happened in the case of Victoria with this permanent pandemic powers bill. So we need to create a larger crossbench with better people on it. Now, one of the things I want to draw attention to is how many Greens senators there are. Interesting, isn't it? Lots of Liberals, lots of Labor, a number of Nationals. Now, the Nationals and Liberals, they are a formal coalition. So there are certain areas where they deconflict and they don't run against each other. And so it's understandable where the Nationals can end up with their numbers and their support from. The Greens, interestingly enough, they are very good at picking up the 6th Senate seat in each jurisdiction. Now, I went through this in more detail a couple of slow chats ago, how that last Senate seat from each state is the easiest one to grab. And the Greens historically have been very good at getting that last Senate seat. That's the cherry that everyone who wants to see change needs to be going for and helping your favorite freedom-friendly minor party to outcompete the Greens for that last Senate seat in each state. And they do pick up a few others as well. They don't just get the last ones. But we need to be in there competing for those last Senate seats and turning some of those bright green dots into some of these more multicolored dots, shifting the balance of power so that the crossbench gets bigger and the caliber of people in the crossbench gets better. So that is a way that we can improve the quality of legislation. And that's already happening. But the big prize is actually here in the lower house. So the significance of the lower house is that this is where government itself is formed. If someone wants to be the Prime Minister, they need a majority in this house in order to do it. Now, once again, we have Liberal Party, we have lots of Nationals. Now, that's because the Liberal Party and the National Party deconflict. They don't run against each other in very many places. And so there are certain seats where all the sort of more conservative votes go to the Nationals and they win the lower house seats. Obviously, the Liberals win lots of lower house seats. Obviously, the Labor Party wins lots of lower house seats. I want you to notice there is only one green dot. Bright green. One bright green dot. The crossbench is made up of 3 grey dots. They are independent, so they don't have any specific party affiliation. One Nation, United Australia Party, and one Green. That's it. For a house with so many more seats than the Senate, it's a very small crossbench. And the Greens, weirdly, having been very well represented in the upper house crossbench, they have very little representation in the lower house crossbench. This gives us some indication of the enormity of the challenge that it is to get lower house seats. In the lower house, to win a seat, your candidate, after preferences, has to have 50% of the votes plus 1. In the Senate, there's 6 Senate seats per state, and that last seat can be won with around about 8% of the vote after preferences. That's a world easier. The Greens can often get sort of 7, 7.5, sometimes 8 or more % in their own right. And then you add some preferences along the way. They can claim that final seat on a pretty regular basis, right? It's a much more difficult thing to get to 50% plus 1. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that bright green dot is Adam Bant down here in Victoria Stan. I might be mistaken on that actually, but I think that's the case. This is where we really need to create a much bigger crossbench. The reason being, this, like I said, is where government is made. You don't become Prime Minister unless you have a majority down here. Now, what that means is if we can create a situation where the Liberal National Party have a swing against them and a bunch of these seats get picked up by independents, by freedom-friendly minor parties, and they don't get picked up by Labor or the Greens. So we can see here, Labor plus 1 Green does not have a majority. What we need to get to is a situation where the Liberal Nationals combined also don't have half the chamber. And the crossbench becomes fatter, a bigger wedge in the middle. Not only that, but like I said before, we need the right people to be on that crossbench. Because now what happens is people that, all the votes are being tallied on election day. And after hours of counting, a picture begins to emerge that neither Scott Morrison nor Anthony Albanese is going to have the numbers to form government. Neither of them is going to have a majority. And we have something that's quite common in Europe. It's quite rare over here. It has happened, but it's quite rare over here. We have a minority government. And what that means is that Anthony Albanese and Scott Morrison are going to be scrambling around, calling all the crossbenchers, schmoozing, asking what they want. What can I give you that will mean that you will support me and not the other guy? I need your vote. I need your support. I need your supply in order to become the prime minister. Now, this is no longer negotiating over a specific piece of legislation, right? They'll argy-bargy about that, and they'll make certain concessions in order to get the legislation through. The stakes on this are so much higher. They're negotiating to get the top job, to get the crown, to become the prime minister. Now, can you imagine if we had a crossbench of, say, I don't know, 10 lower house seats, and 6 or 7 of them were made up of MPs from freedom-friendly minor parties, and that neither Scott Morrison nor Anthony Albanese could become the prime minister without the support of that bloc of freedom-friendly MPs. What could be done? What could be insisted on, demanded, especially if they agreed to work together as a bloc, which I'm fairly sure they actually would under these circumstances. I'm pretty sure that One Nation, United Australia Party, Liberal Democrats and others would be on the phone to each other straight away saying, hey, let's not let them pick us apart piecemeal. Let's work together like a minor party or a minor coalition within the halls of government. And they don't give their support to either side until everyone within that little coalition is happy. And hold them to ransom effectively. You want the top job? Okay, here are our demands. And I would like to see demands such as never lock down again. We will never plunge the people of Australia into lockdown again. We will pass legislation to ensure that state governments can never do that again. And I'll talk about the overlap between federal and state legislation in a couple of minutes too. Never locking the borders to Australian citizens again. I think it's a disgrace that we did it the first time. Never do that again. And a bunch of other things, okay? Passing legislation that effectively bans mandatory vaccinations or vaccine requirements in workplaces, etc. These are the sorts of things that a small block of freedom-friendly minor party MPs that are sitting in a crossbench and holding the balance of power, because this is no longer just about whether or not they can pass a piece of legislation. This is about whether or not they get to be prime minister. The stakes are so high that they can place these sorts of demands in front of those who would be king and actually have a serious conversation with them about it. And they're going to have to take them seriously because they don't get to be prime minister without them. This is where the opportunity lies. Winning lower house seats is hard. It's hard. Most parties never achieve it. Most parties in their entire existence, political parties, there's lots more than you've ever heard of. Lots of them come and go. Even the ones that do manage to get a hold of an upper house seat from time to time never manage to get a lower house seat. It is hard. It requires a good strategy. It requires a good candidate with good roots in their local area, well known and well liked in their local area, a good community around them. It requires volunteers to hit the streets, hand out how to vote cards, and be there at polling booths, be stuffing letterboxes, putting up posters. It's a ground war. Winning a lower house seat is a ground war within that local area. And this is where you guys come in. Pick your personal favorite freedom-friendly minor party. Become a financial member. It's not usually a lot of money. Okay. Give them the legitimacy that comes with having more financial members as part of their party. And then volunteer. Volunteer your time, volunteer your talents. Okay, so the crossbench in the Senate needs to get bigger, and we need to improve the caliber of people. There's some good people in there already, but we need to improve on that. The crossbench in the lower house, that's where this game is won and lost. That's what we need to be shooting for, and be throwing our support behind our favorite freedom-friendly minor party to help them pick up one lower house seat, 2 lower house seats, who knows? And if UAP got a few, One Nation got a few, Liberal Democrats got a few, all of a sudden, we can start to build a freedom-friendly lower house crossbench, House of Representatives crossbench. Don't think of this as an election between. Yeah, sorry, I've just seen someone make a comment. Not the LNP, the LDP. So I am not a fan of the Liberal National Party at all. I am a big fan of the Liberal Democratic Party. The similarity in their name is unfortunate, but it is what it is. They are completely different things. So, for example, here in Victoria, David Limbrick and Tim Quilty come from the Liberal Democratic Party, and they've been speaking out for over a year against lockdowns, now against mandates, etc., in support of our right to protest. David Limbrick himself has been arrested at one of the protests. These are good guys, all right, and girls in the party as well. David Limbrick, by the way, is the lead Senate candidate for the Liberal Democratic Party in Victoria. So he is trying to get one of these seats in the Senate, right? We're trying to flip one of those seats from being bright green to being, what's the LDP color? I think it's like a bright blue or something. I actually don't recall. So, yeah, David Limbrick was great in Parliament today. Absolutely, 100%. All right, we'll talk about preferences again soon. I do bang on about preferences a little bit, and I'm going to keep banging on about preferences because it matters. Yes, preferences are important. So we're trying to put David Limbrick into one of these federal Senate seats. That's one of our tasks at the next election. Where are we at? Yeah, so this is not an election of Liberal versus Labor. Oh, we need to kick out Scott Morrison. Well, I'm sorry, Anthony Albanese would not have been better. It might have been a lot worse. And what we need to think of this as is this is an election of the status quo, the duopoly of these guys just sort of swapping places from time to time, versus change. The way we change this picture, we can't put David Limbrick in as Prime Minister. We're not going to see that big of a change in a single election cycle, right? But what we can do is put him in a position where he and a group of other freedom-friendly senators can hold the balance of power. Do the same thing in the lower house. Hold the balance of power. Hold these guys accountable. That is achievable this election. But we have to break out of this Labor versus Liberal thing. Don't swap from one to the other. Go from them, abandon them entirely, and give your support to one of these freedom-friendly minor parties. It's the establishment versus the people. And I'm sorry to use that term. It's an overused term now, the establishment. But it is. It's the established major parties that think that power is their birthright versus the people who want their power back. That's what these upcoming elections are about. We absolutely have to send a message. We absolutely have to send a message at this federal election. We need to send a message that is so clear that Daniel Andrews has to sit up and pay attention, and especially all the Labor Party backbenchers that right now are in lockstep, in unity behind him, go, oh crap, we're being led to oblivion. We're being led to annihilation. Not just that we're going to lose power and the Liberal Party will have power, but actually there's a seismic shift happening in Australian politics. And we need to get on board that. Otherwise, we're going to be left behind by it. This federal election gives us an opportunity to send that message to Daniel Andrews prior to the Victorian election. And I intend to make the most of that opportunity. It doesn't matter where in Australia you are. If you absolutely have to leave Victoria, I've made the choice not until after the state election. I've been saying for quite some time, if Victoria does actually re-elect Daniel Andrews again, that's my sign to get out. That's when I go, okay, you know what, guys, I'm done here. I'm gone. You can have what you want and enjoy the consequences of that. Until then, I'm going to keep on doing everything that I can for this state that I've called home for 37 out of my 30, actually for all the mates. So I grew up on the Murray, but I was actually on the Victorian side of the Murray. So actually my entire life. I was born in Corowa, which is New South Wales, just over the border, but I've lived here all my life. I've lived in Melbourne for 37 out of my 39 years, and I'm going to keep fighting for it. But if, I've talked about Venezuela before, I won't bore you with that story, but the lesson that I learned, have a plan B, and I'm not going to be that guy who grows old watching his children suffer because he didn't have a plan B. But I don't believe for me that it's time for me to activate my plan B yet. You may think differently for you, but wherever you go, be involved, be engaged, because the federal election, it's all over the country. and you can help to shift the needle in whatever electorate you settle in. So I'm not going to give you a Winston Churchill style, I promise you blood, nothing but blood, sweat, tears, and suffering, and blah, blah, blah. But listen, I need you to be willing to get uncomfortable. Not I, we. We need, all of us, to be willing to get uncomfortable, to not just sign up to a political party, which is already uncomfortable for a lot of us. Let's be honest. Most of us haven't done that at any point in our lives. And there's a reason for that. It's a bit sort of weird. It's a bit uncomfortable. It's not sort of the Australian way to be politically engaged. We need to get uncomfortable. We need to get active. We need to be willing to have some people not like us very much. That's something I'm very comfortable with now. It was a bit weird to start with, but I tell you, you get used to it. It's fine. You need to be willing to invest not just the cost of a financial membership, but to invest your time, to be the boots on the ground. And if you're willing to actually volunteer to help organize, they need people coordinating different areas. It's a big logistical exercise to volunteer your time to be a part of that. Imagine, there's over 1,000 people watching this right now. Imagine if 1,000 people all of a sudden were getting in touch with the Liberal Democratic Party. Liberal Democrats, they're my number one pick. I'm going to keep on saying their name. They're my number one pick. But also United Australia Party, GAP, One Nation. I always forget them. There's a bunch, okay? What if 1,000 new members showed up tonight and tomorrow who didn't just pay a membership fee, but actually said, right, I'm here, I'm available, I'm willing to get uncomfortable and get off the couch and get involved and stop being a spectator? How much that would radicalize the ground game for those minor parties. Those minor parties often don't have the manpower to have someone handing out how to vote cards at every polling booth, let alone every entrance to every polling booth. Forget it. They don't have that. But we can change that. That's up to us. We can give them that manpower so that they can actually run that ground game. Get uncomfortable, get active, be willing for this to cost you time and energy. Now, personally, I posted the other day, I think it was 2 days ago, I've now joined the Liberal Democratic Party. First time I've been a member of a political party in a very long time. I've joined them because of the work that David Limbrick and Tim Quilty have done, and because I consider them to be the only consistently principled, freedom-friendly party. There are other parties that are good on certain issues. I would argue less good on other issues, but you're free to make your own decision. Okay, they're the ones that I've chosen, the Liberal Democratic Party, and I'll be actively helping them as much as I can, whilst I'm also continuing to do all of this sort of stuff and sort of do what I do through that time as well. Now, the other interesting thing about the Liberal Democrats specifically is that they are running David Limbrick as their lead Senate candidate. Now, can you imagine the shockwave that would go through the Victorian Labor Party if David Limbrick was so popular that he got elected to the federal Senate in his own right, not on some preference deal? So they got into their current positions through preferences and preference deals, which is fine. It's perfectly legitimate. It's part of our system. But what if we could actually get him elected to the federal Senate in his own right, get him that 8% or more that he needs to win a seat, just like what the Greens do, to pick up that 6th Senate seat? What if we could get him 14%? So he doesn't even pick up the last Senate seat. He actually picks up one of the other ones. And then who knows, maybe the second LDP candidate might pick up the second seat. That's pretty optimistic. I'm shooting for the sky here. But if we could put David Limbrick into the federal Senate, we would be showing such a rise in support for the minor parties, and specifically for the minor party that was in Parliament and was most vocal against Daniel Andrews. Out of all of the parties, they are the ones that did the heavy lifting. If we could send that signal to Daniel Andrews at the federal election early next year, how is that going to affect his thinking and his strategy heading towards the state election later in the year? How is that going to affect the backbenchers in his party as they wonder whether they're going to keep their seats heading towards the next election? We need to send shockwaves through the political culture. And in my opinion, the best way to do that is to get David Limbrick his Senate seat federally. My goal is to see the Liberal Democrats get 8% of the Senate vote, at least, and to see David Limbrick elected into the federal Senate on primary votes, not just preferences. Preferences are crucial, and if it happens through preferences, so be it. but I want to see him get that Senate seat with 8% or more of the vote. But to do that, I can't do that because it's about manpower. It's about boots on the ground. It's about thousands of people getting uncomfortable and getting active and getting involved and giving their time and giving their energy. That's what does that. Preferences matter. I'm going to talk a lot more about that closer to the election. I've gone into detail on it a couple of times. I won't bore you with that again now. But the big two are the big two because they can run a ground game. They have volunteers that stand on polling booths, hand out how to vote cards. They have brand recognition because people are wearing their shirts and talking about them and walking around representing them, right? It's that manpower aspect that does that. We can do that for the minor parties. There just needs to be enough of us that go, okay, I'm only one person, but I'll be another one person. And then 10 people, and then 100 people, then 1,000 people do that. And suddenly the entire election starts to look very, very different. There's my tummy grumbling. So that is my main exhortation today. We need to get active. We need to get involved. Manpower matters. Get in the arena. This was my post from the other day on my Facebook page. Get in the arena. The man in the arena. The woman in the arena. Get in the arena. Don't be spectating. And I know a lot of you haven't been. I'm not trying to be patronizing. I know a lot of you have been very active. But we need to stay that way. Don't allow what's happened today to take us out of the fight, to take us out of the game. Don't become a spectator just because of what's happened today. All right. Well, that's enough on that, I think. So, would you like to hear a song? This is a song. I reached out to a couple of different musicians, and there's 2 songs being made for the documentary, and this is one of them. And Irwin Thomas, otherwise known as Jack Jones from Southern Sons, has worked. I was going to say worked with me, but that's actually unfair. He basically, I gave him the concept, I gave him some reference material, and he went, "Yes, mate, I've got it. Leave it with me." And he came back with an absolute gem. It's freaking brilliant. And I can't really claim any credit for this because it really was him. He ran out there. It was him and also Reggie Thomas, Peter Reggie Thomas, worked together, wrote this together. And I think all the vocals that you'll hear are Irwin Thomas. I'm getting Peter's name wrong. Let me make sure I get his name right because he's worked hard on this. So, Peter Reggie Bowman. Excuse me. I think I said Peter Reggie Thomas. So, Peter Reggie Bowman. He'll be on the right-hand side of screen as you hear the song, and Jack Jones, Irwin Thomas, will be on the left-hand side of screen. And this, I think, is a pretty amazing song for the moment in history where we find ourselves. So this is also going to be our loo break for today. I'll play it again at the end. So if you need to take a break, recharge your glass, do whatever you got to do that. I'll play the song again right at the very end of the show. But I'm going to take a break myself. Enjoy this song. Okay, I can't hear that. Why can't I hear that? Give me 1 sec. I'm going to have to do some troubleshooting. Why can I not hear the song? Okay. It is definitely working. It's definitely there. Let me just jump back in, bring it up again. Can you guys hear that? Because it ain't playing for me. That's annoying. John Farnham is jamming the signal. Look, this is almost certainly a fat fingers issue at my end. But wow. Okay, no sound. Right. Well, I apologize. That is not how that was supposed to go. It's a great song. Did you like the song? How's that, guys? How good was that? Right. Well, there's not much more I can do. I'm playing the video. It is not muted. Let me just... Yeah, it's definitely not muted. All right, guys. I'm sorry. But no, it's not a copyright issue. It hasn't been copyrighted yet. So, or it hasn't been like marked as copyrighted yet. So, okay. Well, there you go. There is the #1 hit by... Okay, so Irwin Thomas has just posted this link here. So, guys, have a loo break. I'm going to do that. I'm going to recharge a glass and go to this link that you see here. You will also find it posted in the Facebook comments and in the YouTube comments. I will repost it now because this is a freaking awesome song. And I'm going to try and do a quick break and come back and figure out what is wrong. In any case, I'll be back in a couple of minutes to keep talking about what's going on with the Doco. Cheers, guys. I've had an idea. Let me try something and see if I can fix this. Stop that. Now, if I remove that. Okay, so that's still not working. Let me remove it. I think I broke it by sharing something else earlier. Hey. Enjoy.
When the smoke clears and you wake up and seize another day, tears will dry up, but damage done will leave a bigger stain. And now you shout it from the rooftops, 'cause there's never been a safer place. Set the cameras on the wreckage, keep the pressure on the message, keep the faith, keep the faith. Rise up, stand for what you feel and you believe, believe. Rise up, all the trusted many who deceive, deceive. Stronger than the chosen, wait and see. You can't legislate emotion when the unison has spoken. Let them breathe. And if they choose to bring the battle, it's just a cage that they can rattle. Let it be. It just proves the disconnection. Judgment days and election. Make them see. Make them see. Rise up, stand for what you feel and you believe. shoulder to shoulder, many years strong. Free will is never gone, it's just underrated. Rise up, be strong. Yeah, I never meant to, but it's so wrong.
Doesn't that just give you a tingle down your spine? That is so good. Irwin and Reggie, top work on the writing. And man, great performance. Thank you so much for your work. So that is a little sneak peek of some of what we've been working on. And like I said, I can't really claim much credit for that. I just kind of said, this is kind of what I want. Here's one piece of reference material. And Irwin Thomas, Jack Jones, yes, the same as from the Southern Sons. He ran with it, and damn, that's good. I knew it was good because he sent me a mix of it, the same one you just listened to. He'd sent me a few references before, but I played this one for my son, and before it had finished playing through the first time, he was already singing along with the Rise Up. And so it told me, man, it's catchy. And then when we got to the end and Irwin just opens up with the vocals, I got chills down my spine. I thought, yep, that's it. That's the one. So that's a little sneak peek of what's been going on with the documentary, Battleground Melbourne. But there is some other news as well. I have regrettably had to push the launch date back. So the target was always the 20th of December. I always knew that was an ambitious target. And with everything that's been continuing to happen, we're kind of having to be working on the documentary in real time as events are unfolding. And it's just caused us to lose time and lose a little bit of momentum. So now with the vote having happened, that's kind of got to be the stopping point of the story in the documentary. And so now we can finally just push through to finishing this thing off, polishing it, making sure it's absolutely perfect. So I have revised the launch date to the 1st of January. So this documentary is going to be what you watch to kickstart the new year. It won't have the ending that we were all hoping for. I'm sorry about that, but it's just reality. We are living in history. And just like when we read about history, we know what happens at the end. But the people who lived that history, the people that wrote that history, they didn't know. And not all of them lived to see, the end of the war or the end of the oppression or the fall of the tyrant or whatever piece of history they were living. Not everyone gets a happy ending in that sense. And that's where we are right now. We're living in history. We are writing history that our children and our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren will read. And so we are now faced with that same uncertainty for us. So this documentary is going to have a not as happy ending as what I would have liked. I would have loved for us to have seen the end of this pandemic legislation and been able to finish the documentary with the city being free. But you know what? We're going to finish with something that's maybe actually more powerful than that. And that is people together. In a way that, you look around the world, people are coming together in ways we haven't seen before. Certainly in Australia, I think we can safely say now that this movement has exceeded the anti-war movement during the Vietnam War. which to my knowledge were previously that was the biggest protest movement that this country had ever seen. Now, I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong about that, but that's what I believe to be true. And we've now easily exceeded the size and the power of that movement. And that really is what this documentary ends up being about. It's about the people of Melbourne, the people of Victoria coming together and taking a stand. And yeah, we haven't finished writing this chapter of history yet, but we are changing the world and we're changing our future as we come together like this. So that really is going to be, I guess, the end of the documentary. There you go. You don't have to watch it now. You already know how it ends. There you go. So yes, so my team are working hard on that. We've kind of put a pin in it and said, okay, this today needs to be. This is where we can't just keep on appending more things to the end of it. Yeah, we now need time to sort of put it all together, polish it, make it really, really good. I had to make a decision. Do I keep pushing for that 20th of December deadline and compromise on the finished product? Or do I just give my team that extra 10 days? And yes, there's Christmas and Boxing Day in there as well. So it's not a full 10 days, but it's going to give them about another week's worth of time to spend working on the project, all in their own specialities and making it the absolute best that it could be. All right. So that is about it from me. That's all the notes that I had. That's what I wanted to share with you and just update you on what's happened with the change of launch date. Oh, sorry. The other thing is with today's events, there is now really no chance of us doing a live in-person premiere. I hadn't announced it, but I was working in the background to be ready to then announce that you could buy $20 tickets to come to the Astor and join with sort of 800 other people there. And I would be there, and as many of the people that were interviewed as we could possibly get there would be there, and the crew would be there, and donors would be there. And we could all just really celebrate what we achieved together. But unfortunately, we didn't get that outcome today. And that means that it's basically there's no chance that I'm not going to hold a segregated event. I'm not going to sit there saying, oh, you can only come if you're jabbed. No. That's not me. I'm not doing that. So unfortunately, the live and in-person premiere, which you didn't even know about, but I had one of my team members working on organizing that just in case. Unfortunately, that effort is in vain now. So maybe what we'll have to do is have a big showing and a big celebration when Daniel Andrews gets thrown out on his ear. We'll do a big celebration somewhere and show the movie and sort of hold a belated premiere, a premiere after the fact. Maybe we can do something like that. People are asking about an open air premiere. Possible, but there are still, I believe, restrictions on gathering sizes and that sort of thing. So I would have to have a think about the logistics. I mean, if you're doing open air, you're taking a risk with the weather. You need some pretty kick-ass gear. You need a professional company to come in and set up the screen. Like if we're going to have hundreds of people, it can't just be someone's home projector on a sheet. That doesn't do it justice, and that would be disrespectful to the people that have come. So I'd have to have a think about the logistical realities of something like that. And I don't have a place where I could do it. Getting permits from the council, I think my chances are basically nil of that happening. So if you've got a big private property somewhere where you're happy to have a whole bunch of people come and invade, then reach out to my Facebook page and let's have a chat. People suggesting a drive-in. I'm not sure that a drive-in is going to want to host this. Paul's saying have it in a church. Unfortunately, the vast majority of churches that I know are all bending over and bowing to our new god, Daniel Andrews. So Froggy is asking, where do we watch it on the 1st of Jan? It'll be released wide online. So it'll be, if you go to battlegroundmelbourne.com, I'll repost that link for you. Go to battlegroundmelbourne.com and put your email address in, and then you'll be given all of the instructions. So as the launch approaches, you'll be given all the links and all that sort of stuff so that you can watch it. Initially, I was hoping to do an exclusive through Rumble, but I haven't been able to get through to the right people there and actually start that conversation. So we're looking at doing a big launch on YouTube and trying to get the YouTube algorithm to be as happy as possible with as many views as possible, as quickly as possible, so that hopefully we can maybe even hit the front page of YouTube and potentially push it out that way. All right, I got a few people saying let's chat regarding space. Send me a message. Send a message to the Facebook page, the Topher Field Facebook page. Happy to have a chat. If you've got ideas, or particularly if you've got resources, if you've got a property that's big enough, if you've got gear where we could project it, sound gear, projector gear, screens, whatever it may be. And I'm talking big, right? You saw the sound system that I got for the protest 2 Saturdays ago. If I'm going to do something, I want to do it right. So I'm not talking about half-assing it here. I'm talking about doing it properly. And if you think you've got something that can help with that, then I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you. All right. Yeah, so Ishnis is saying only the vaxxed are allowed into drive-ins. I understand that to be true. So, yeah, I don't think drive-ins are going to be a realistic option for us, unfortunately. Lots of people suggesting projecting it onto Parliament House. Look, I'm trying to stay out of prison. Like I'm willing to take the risk, but I'm not just going to like volunteer myself as jailbait. Okay, so I'm not gonna push my luck that much. People are saying farmers. Yes, but that then means a long drive for a lot of people. So, how many people are actually going to make the trip out to a more remote location? Obviously, that's going to knock a lot of people out. Families with young kids, etc., can't make the drive out, do the event, and then make the drive all the way home again. So there's a few issues there that need to be thought about. So that's why I say, if you've got an idea, get in touch with my Facebook page. I do try to read every single message. I try to read every single email that I get. I don't respond to anywhere, not even half, way less than half, just because of the reality of my time. But I do try to read them all. So yeah, send me your ideas, send me your thoughts, send me your offers if you've got land or anything else. Yes, Doris, looking for property for screening. The next Woodstock for freedom, says Bridget. Yes, let's have a freedom Woodstock. I'm not the only person who's thinking that. There's some people actually organizing some really cool stuff coming up, which it's not my project, so I'm not going to announce it and spoil their fun. But I have offered to throw my support behind it. So we're in discussions at the moment. Alrighty. Has anyone got any more questions? Not that I've got necessarily all the answers, but I'll do what I can, and if I can't, I won't, or I'll direct you to someone who might have the answers. So I've got a little bit more time. I've got a little bit of cigar to go. Let's just have a chat. Weekend. Yes, this weekend. Thank you. I did want to cover that. No, I just completely forgot. Okay, so the poster is on my Facebook page to understand what the plans are for this weekend. As always, I'm not an organizer, but this weekend, Saturday, 12 midday at Parliament House, we need this to be a big one, guys. We need this to be a big one because we need to make a statement that all the politicians will see and hear, that we're not just going away because we lost this fight, right? This was one battle in a much bigger war. And yes, I did. Thank you for asking, Hazel. So we need to be there on Saturday to make a statement. Now, yes, we want to make a statement, but please don't be an angry mob. I get it. The emotions are running high, and people are pretty frustrated and pretty upset and pretty angry and or worse. But let's show a city that is coming together, not a city that's descending into a mob. Let's show a city that's coming together in unity and taking back their power to themselves and rejecting the Daniel Andrews power grab. But let's do it with smiles on our faces towards each other, towards any shopkeepers we interact with, towards any hecklers that we have, towards the police especially. Let's be the bigger man, all right? And let's do this the right way. And then the following day, Sunday, the 5th, which is the anniversary of the Eureka Stockade, there is a car convoy. I believe the timing is to be aiming to be crossing the Westgate Bridge, heading out of the city right on about 11 o'clock in the morning, and to be at the Ballarat Town Hall at 2 p.m. on Sunday. Thea, thank you very much for that comment. I appreciate that. So where was I? That's right, the convoy out to Ballarat. Now, this is super important, guys. We are going en masse to somebody else's town. Let's make sure that they're glad we came. Okay. Yes, there's going to be a lot of congestion. It's going to be parking chaos, all the rest of it. Never forget that there are going to be locals just trying to do their shopping, trying to go about their day. Never forget that there are people there that don't necessarily agree with what we are talking about, right? Let's be polite to everybody. Let's have a smile on our face. Let's spend some money. Find places that are, doing a good job. And I won't say what I mean by that specifically, but find the places that are worthy of your support and spend your money with them. Make the town glad that we came. Civic Hall, excuse me. Tanya has corrected me and said it's the Civic Hall, not the Town Hall. Let me just grab the poster. I should be able to share that with you. Scroll down. It's a long way down on my page. So give me a minute. I'm going to have to scroll down. Yes, my internet is slow because I'm streaming. Please load faster. Scrolling. I do post a lot. That's ridiculous. Come on. There it is. Okay. Civic Hall. You're absolutely right. Thank you for correcting me. I appreciate that because that is a mistake I would not have wanted to have left uncorrected. Let me get it up on the screen for you. How am I going to do that? Where am I? There I am. Okay. So I'm going to take that away. Sorry. I've just got to unshare, remove, and then I can share because that's what created the problem earlier. I had too many things shared at once. That one, share that. Okay, so Saturday the 4th, Melbourne, 12 p.m. Parliament. Let me just check that that's worked. Yes, it has. And then Sunday the 5th, Ballarat, 2 p.m. Civic Hall, not the Town Hall. My apologies, that was my mistake. And the aim is to all of us be moving over the Westgate Bridge outbound at about 11 a.m. So that's the plan. And can we just make sure that the town of Ballarat is really, really glad that we came. Really, really happy that we showed up, that we brightened their day, that we spent our money. Now, what's interesting is the Ballarat City Council today announced that they have actually postponed some of the events that they had planned to commemorate the anniversary of the Eureka Stockade to the following Sunday, which is interesting. It's interesting because it says a couple of things. Firstly, they're expecting big numbers. Why would they shuffle around their plans if they weren't expecting big numbers to come? And in their release, in their press release, they specifically said because of other unrelated events happening, right? So it's us. We're coming. And they've actually postponed some of their planned events to commemorate the anniversary of Eureka to the following Sunday, which is a bit of a shame in one sense because that's unfortunate. Like it is an event that deserves to be commemorated. But I would say that what we're doing on that day is honoring and commemorating that event. So it says two things to me. Number one, they're expecting a lot of numbers. Number two, we shouldn't have any trouble from them. That's my hope anyway, that they are going to allow us to come in, to hold that event, to have lunch, picnic, spend some money, and then to go home. And hopefully that's what is going to happen. And no one's going to have trouble. The organizers won't have any trouble. Fingers crossed. It's just a really, really great day. Now, oh, that's right. That's what someone asked before, and I didn't answer. Let me just refresh this page and see if it has happened. It doesn't look like it has yet. Okay, let me give you another sneak peek. I just need to get into my emails now. Today was a crazy day, and I ended up sitting down literally just a few minutes before. Oops. Okay, so that's fine. So this is a little something that my designer, Carly, has made. Let me get this on the screen for you. Share the screen. That one. And so this is a shirt that we were hoping to get up tonight, but there was just a slight flaw in the graphics. So we're getting that sorted out right now. And the Eureka Spirit Lives in Me will be being added to the t-shirt lineup just as soon as we can get that fixed. Now, that's not a fundraising t-shirt. I want to be really clear about this. The organizers of this weekend haven't asked me for any financial help. And so thankfully, I'm at no risk of sleeping in the doghouse this weekend, which is lovely. But if you do choose to buy this shirt, understand it's supporting me. If you want to support the protests themselves, you'll need to be there and then find out what the organizers have planned in terms of any fundraising that they may have planned. I've not been informed of anything at this point in time. Previously, that hasn't been done. They haven't done any fundraising for stuff. And I don't know if they have anything planned for this week, for this protest, but I want to be really clear. This is a support for me. It supports my work, all the slow chats, the commentary that I offer, the speeches at protests, all that stuff. It costs me to do it. And this is one of the ways that I'm trying to, these sorts of things is how I'm trying to sort of financially justify what I do. Okay. Can we get them for Ballarat? No, unfortunately. It's not going to happen fast enough, Craig. We wanted to get this out earlier in the week, but unfortunately, with all of the I Was There t-shirts, and Brad is only able to print about 250 t-shirts a day. So my t-shirt supplier, he's in Horsham, great guy, works his ass off to get everything done. But there is a limit to how quickly the machines can work. So he is still working his way through the backlog. Which is great. That's a great problem to have. But no, we can't get these out to you. And also Australia Post is being really slow. Marcus, who's been helping me with comments tonight, he's got one of my hoodies on right now. He said it took nearly 2 weeks in the post. Brad printed it and sent it the same day that he ordered. And then it took him 2 weeks nearly to actually reach him. So unfortunately, there's no chance of it getting to you in time for the protest. I'm sorry. But I do think that the message is pretty timeless. And it's the sort of thing that I will be getting one of, and I'll be including in my my wardrobe and my rotation of shirts and stuff that I have. Okay. Yeah, Aussie Post is FUBAR at the moment. They certainly are. And actually, that's a point. If you were planning on getting some of my shirts in time for Christmas, you need to be thinking about that now, just simply because of how long Australia Post are taking. Let me actually, where have I got that? There we go. Let me just copy and paste. If you are interested in the shirts, there you go. There is the link. It should pop up in both Facebook and YouTube. And so you're buying directly from a company in Horsham, country Victoria. The shirts themselves are not made in Australia. I get a lot of questions about that. I want to be really clear. They're not made in Australia, but they're also not made in China. They are good quality. They're really well stitched, and the actual cotton itself and the fabric itself is really good. The printing is really good, but it's that printing on top of the fabric. It's not actual, what's it called? Sublimation printing or whatever that's called. So it's not going to last forever, but it is good quality. It will last for a long time. If you wash them inside out and you don't stick them into a hot dryer, then they will last for a long time, but they're not going to last forever. This will eventually start to crack and that sort of thing, but they should last you for a very long time. And hey, a shirt with a little bit of age on it always looks good in my opinion. Anyway. Do we make anything in Australia anymore? Well, we do, and there are a number of companies hanging on for dear life. And this is why I wanted them printed in Australia. I could at least do that, right? Getting the shirts made in Australia, unfortunately, it just isn't financially viable. You guys aren't willing or able to pay that price. Thank you, Melissa, for that comment on the quality. Yeah, hang them inside out, exactly. And buy 2 shirts, 1 to wear, 1 for a keepsake. I like that idea. Buy 10 shirts, 5 to wear, 5 for keepsake. Where will the movie be showing online? It's going to be available free to watch initially on YouTube. So the link that you want to be on to get all that information is go to battlegroundmelbourne.com. There you go, battlegroundmelbourne.com. Put your email address in. And you will be given all the notifications as things happen. And as we get ready for the launch, you will know exactly when it's going to happen, where you need to be so that you can be one of the first people who actually watches it. Yeah, that's true for all shirts, but especially dark fabrics. Dry them in the shade, not in the summer sun. I wash them inside out and then I hang them over the back of a shirt or hang them on a clothes horse inside. And they should last for a very long time that way. Okay, now let's get to some other things because I'm not here to sell shirts. Okay, what do I think of Aussie Cossacks' inclusion in the lineup for the weekend? I actually haven't seen the lineup. Is it polarizing? Everyone's polarizing. You talk to some people. I'm this right-wing nut job, neo-Nazi, whatever, right? People talk about Avi, and I'll put my hand up and say I didn't repost any of Avi's content for quite some time because of all the drama surrounding him. I was like, I don't know if I want to be associated with that, etc. And that was the wrong decision. I shouldn't have allowed that to affect my opinion of him. Now that I've met him a few times, I really like the guy, and I think he's really good value, and I think he's a lot of what he's accused of being is actually kind of the opposite, which is funny enough the same with me. I'm accused of being all sorts of things, and I'm like, you couldn't be further from the truth. I'm apparently a white nationalist. No, I'm an open borders libertarian. If you want to come here, come here. I am more pro-immigration than the Greens, and yet I get branded with that brush. So everyone's polarizing if you talk to the wrong person. Now, okay, some people court controversy. Some people like that. It's sort of part of their brand. I don't do that. Okay, I try to, if you watch my actual stuff rather than listen to other people talking about me, I try not to be particularly polarizing. Some people do. Okay, I right from the very beginning, I'm going to rabbit hole here for a minute. Right from the very beginning, from the April 25th protest, I had people get in touch with me. Oh, you've ruined your brand now. There were a whole bunch of 5G COVID conspiracy theorists, and no one's ever going to take you seriously again. Blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? My audience has grown massively since then. I've gone from being a relatively marginal political commentator to being a less marginal political commentator and a relatively influential figure within the movement. I didn't lose, my reputation wasn't destroyed the way that they said it would be. Then fast forward to, sort of late 2020. Oh, you're involved in these illegal protests. The police are cracking down and you've lost all your credibility, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I just kind of learned to ignore the noise. It's just noise. It's become a mantra of mine, almost as much as good people break bad laws. My other mantra now in what I do is it's just noise. There's all these people that want to make all this noise. But there's a funny thing that happens. If you listen to those people and you give them power, then they own you from that moment on. Like, you look at these big corporations where someone's outraged. Oh, we found that your CEO 20 years ago said this thing. And they go, oh, we better fire the CEO. We're going to reshuffle our board. We're going to whatever, right? From that moment on, the mob own you. The minute you give them an inch, the mob own you. And I've taken the approach, and I've advised other people to take the approach, and those that have had good success with it, of just ignoring it. It's just noise. And I've lived by that mantra now since April 25th, when I was inundated with an avalanche of hate. The biggest lump of hate that I've ever had poured on me was poured on me on the 25th, and in the days that followed. Lies were told about me. I've been accused of doing stuff that's despicable that I never did. And I haven't really felt the need to go running around finding the people saying that and trying to set the record straight and correct them and tell them they're wrong, and let alone apologize. It's just noise. There's all this noise around me. And the minute I pay attention to it, it stops me from moving forward. But for as long as I take the approach that, it's just noise, I can keep doing what I do and being effective. And so I don't tend to pay a lot of attention when there's a lot of noise around another person. Is that a bad idea? Maybe. Does it mean that in the end I get associated with one or two people that, had I known or had I paid more attention, I might have chosen not to? Maybe. Do I care? Not particularly. We're in the fight of our lives against the closest thing to a fascist dictator that this country has ever seen. I'm not too worried if people are whispering behind my back and making false accusations behind my back. And I'm not going to pay too much attention to the noise around other people. Keep in mind, the French resistance during the Second World War, the Americans were supporting the French resistance, knowing that a lot of them were communists. Why? Because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. In a moment like this, we can't afford to be drawing lines and creating divisions and distancing ourselves from people. We need to find allies wherever we find them and work with them to get the best possible outcome. That's my view on that. Okay. Yeah. Avi is a supposed Jewish neo-Nazi white supremacist. Yeah, he ain't white. He's certainly not a neo-Nazi. It's just like, you just have to laugh. And then I put up the posters for for Battleground Melbourne, and we did this artistic thing where we cut people halfway through the second eye. There's an eye and a half showing on each of the posters. Instantly, there was this backlash. Oh, don't you know that's the Illuminati? Oh, you've shown your true colors now. There's all kinds of conspiracy theories going on. I'm like, guys, you don't even know your own conspiracy theories very well, right? The Illuminati one-eyed thing is specifically covering an eye that is in the shot. Right? If you see a photo with someone doing this, well, that might be, isn't always, but that might be an Illuminati symbol, right? Someone whose eye is not in the shot is not an Illuminati symbol. And someone whose eye is half in the shot is definitely not an Illuminati symbol. They don't even know their conspiracy theories very well. But boy, are they passionate and willing to make some noise. And so it's just noise. I don't know, when you find yourself sitting where I am, and I have just kind of found myself here. This wasn't a plan. When I started making videos 12 years ago, I didn't have a long-term plan. I've only really started to take this seriously in the last 4 or 5 months. I've found myself here, and I find myself surrounded by all this absurd noise. So I just tune it out. I don't care, and that's my approach. When there's all this noise around other people, I don't care. Are they helping us to win this fight? Yes, good. And you may take a different view, and you're welcome to, but that's the view that I take. What if a Cyclops wanted to join the Illuminati? James Bennett, always asking the big questions. Dear. Okay. Yeah, this I think is the crux of it. A lot of people are scared. Let me rehash something that I said. I haven't said it for a while, but I said a long time ago, to do with conspiracy theories, that there are so many people that spend their life so caught up in conspiracy theories and fear that it becomes debilitating for them. And I've seen people, good people, kind of ruin their lives, or at the very least ruin a few years of their lives by getting so hung up on the big conspiracy. So I have a test. I have 2 questions that I ask myself when I hear these things, before I've spent any time researching them. When I hear this thing, the Queen is a shape-shifting lizard person. Okay, hang on. 2 questions. Is there a way that I can actually verify whether or not that's true? Is there? Because for some there is. Like you look at the Great Reset, you can verify that that's true, right? You can go online and you can see them talking about it. The World Economic Forum talking about the Great Reset. You can verify that. But there are lots that you can't. You or I cannot verify whether or not the Queen is a shape-shifting lizard person, right? The second question is, even if I could verify it, is there anything I could actually do about it? Would it change how I live day to day? And if the answer to that is no, if the answer to both questions is no, then the rational choice is to push it to one side and ignore it. If you cannot verify it, and even if you could, even if you could verify it, it wouldn't change how you live or what you do, then you just push it to one side. Because every ounce of energy that you spend into something that doesn't make a difference in the world is energy that you could have spent. It's opportunity cost. It's things that you could have done that would have made a difference, but now you've wasted that energy by potentially chasing shadows. And in the process, you've hurt your own mental health. And I've seen people do this to themselves. So I would really encourage anyone that is kind of caught up in a lot of that conspiracy stuff, put it to the test. Not the test of, is it true or is it not? No. Can you actually yourself find out whether it's true or not? Or are you relying on a friend of a friend's uncle's dog's, bit of postman one time, and the postman told him that he'd read a letter that said this thing, right? Because that's a lot of it's like, it's as absurd as that, okay? Can you verify that it's true? Some things you can. Many of them you can't. And even if you could verify that it's true, would it change anything in terms of what you should do in the world and how you should live? And if the answer is no, then just put it aside. Just put it, for your own mental health, just put it aside. And that's how I Simon, the pedo elite thing took me away from life for too long. Now, this is a great example because there is clearly a problem here. Look at the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. All right. Look at all of what's happened there. There is clearly a massive problem here. Right. But can you or I, from where we are, verify whether or not Prince Andrew was involved, or verify whether or not Bill Clinton was involved? And even if you can verify that, does that change what you can do? And does it change, can you influence anything with that knowledge, even assuming that you can verify it to be true? You can make your own mind up on that. But for me, I would say no. And so I'm not going to invest my time into that. Now, it's a sliding scale, and different people are going to make different decisions on different things. There is the question of the suppression order, I think it's a 90-year suppression order on a bunch of Australian politicians who were pedophiles. Now, that's much more relevant because some of these people are still in Parliament, and some of these people are retired and still alive and living in Australia. And why was such a long suppression order put on their identities, et cetera, et cetera? There are some real questions to be asked there. Now, you may decide that that's something you want to pursue. For me personally, I haven't. I feel like I've got much more immediate challenges and things to try and confront. So there's a sliding scale here, and different people will make different decisions. But I always put it to that test. Can I verify it? And even if I could, would it change how I live? And if it wouldn't, then I just park it. Just park it for the sake of my own head, for the sake of my own mental health. I just park it. Yeah, maybe that's probably not the best. There's a what's his name? A comedian did a great skit around. Oh no, I'm not a racist. I really like black people. Oh, no, I'm not sexist. I really like women. Oh no, I'm not a pedophile. I really like children. Oh wait, no, that one doesn't work. Yeah. He delivers it a lot better than I do, but it's a good routine. Very politically incorrect, as all good comedy is. Okay. This is it. In a nutshell. Deal with the most immediate problem. The rest can wait. Chris says, good try, Toverfield. Thank you. I appreciate the sympathy laugh. I really appreciate the sympathy laugh that you gave me to my very bad rendition of a very talented stand-up comedian whose name I just don't recall. I will do. Thank you, Danny. I'm glad, Kathy. Yeah, let's put our energy where it can actually make a difference. This is also true. Don't let the urgent drown out the important. This is a counterbalance to the point that I just made, and it's worth mentioning. So thank you, Benjamin. Yeah, I mean, dealing with what's right in front of you can sometimes mean that you get caught up in the immediate and you aren't necessarily thinking about the longer term. And so that is something definitely to keep in mind. But again, that doesn't, like, if you can't verify it and it wouldn't change anything, okay. Yeah, well, this is a great way of approaching it, right? Whether the government is composed of lizards or pedos or just greedy normal people, the real question is how much power should they have over us? And notice how that's a much more relevant question that you can influence much more, right? It brings it down from the level of, oh, there's these overlords and they're out of reach and blah, blah, blah. And you bring it down, you go, okay, people want to tell me, oh, Daniel Andrews has been bought by China. Well, I can't verify that. Like, he's obviously got a very cozy relationship with China. Is he working for the Chinese? Well, I can't verify that. But you know what? It doesn't matter because it doesn't change anything because I'm trying to get rid of him anyway, right? I don't need to get caught up in that conspiracy theory because it wouldn't actually change what I do and how I behave. I don't care whether I'm being oppressed by a lizard or a human. I just want to be left alone, 100%. And that's the approach. It's a really Occam's razor. Just cut through all the noise and get to the crux of the thing that you can actually influence and spend your energy there. Yeah, and this is another aspect of this, and this is what happens when people are like, saying to me, "Oh, you're Illuminati," blah blah blah. Right? You get so caught up in these conspiracy theories, it turns into a witch hunt. You start seeing it everywhere. Once you've become hyper vigilant and hyper aware of this big grand conspiracy, you just start seeing it everywhere, and that's a problem. It's a waste of energy and creates division where there just doesn't need to be. Occam was lazy. That's why I like him. So, guys, inflation is coming. Okay, you can go back to a talk that I did called "Government and God." The politics of faith. The politics of faith as government tries to take the place of God. It's a talk that I did on April 25th this year, 2021. Go to my videos tab on my Facebook page or my YouTube channel. Scroll down, you'll find it. April 25th, 2021. And I talked about the fact that real inflation is much higher than what's being reported, and has been for quite some time. Now we've finally got the Fed coming out and acknowledging that inflation is actually really high and it's not going to be transitory. So this is a US Fed, okay? So inflation is high. It's going to get worse before it gets better. It's going to stay bad for quite some time. Is this a death spiral for the US dollar, the way that some people predict? It could be. It genuine, when you look at the numbers and how much debt they're in and how little substance there is to the US economy now, it's not out of the question. I'm not saying it is, but it's not out of the question. So, guys, think about what that means for you. And I can't tell you what to do. I'm not a financial advisor. I can't give you individual advice, blah, 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 disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. But let me tell you what it means for me. I'm trying to get my money into things that generate an income. So for some people, that's property, right? If inflation goes through the roof, property prices go through the roof with it, with some exceptions, because there can be a property crash brought on by high interest rates because people have to leave the property market. And if you're holding property, I don't know. I mean, again, I can't tell you what to do, but I'd be thinking about fixing my interest rate for a while. I'd be thinking about probably trying to reduce the amount of debt that I owe so that that interest payment doesn't become completely unachievable. I mean, you've only got to go back to the 1990s to see inflation rates at interest rates at 14, 15, 16%. It's definitely not out of the question that that can happen again. So have a think about what that would mean for you. So people have been asking me to talk about Plan B and am I getting out of Victoria? Am I getting out of Australia? We are continuing to work on our Plan B. Now, our Plan B, essentially, there's two things that you need at a most basic level to have a Plan B. That is somewhere to go and a way to survive when you get there. Right? You got to have somewhere to go. You got to have a way to survive when you get there. Now, when I talk about Plan Bs, I tend to be talking internationally because Australia is not going to go well if Victoria doesn't go well. So I'm talking internationally, and there are places in the world where, forget passports for a moment because they take a lot of time and they tend to cost a lot of money. You don't need a passport. You just need a residence permit. And there are parts of the world, particularly throughout Central America and the Caribbean, where all you have to do to get a residence permit is show up and deposit a not unreasonable sum of money into a local bank account, sometimes as little as $5,000 into a local bank account. All they want you to do is prove that you're not going to be a burden on them. And then you're welcome to come and live and spend your money and so forth. So getting somewhere outside of Australia to live is relatively easy. And we're continuing to work on that. We've got some options in place already. We're working on opening up a few other options for ourselves as well. The harder part is actually figuring out how you continue living while you're there. How do you continue earning an income while you're there? And that's a bigger topic for another time. I have talked about it previously, some time ago now. I haven't really touched on it for a little while. But the thing that I would be thinking about is location-independent income. The majority of the world, once you're in a city, has good enough internet access, right? May not be world's first, but hey, Australia's not world first, let's be clear. But you go to Mexico City, internet's great. You go to Nicaragua, internet's great. You go to most Caribbean islands, if you're in town, internet's passable. It's reasonable. You can do business over the internet from there. So thinking about, you might be a wage earner at the moment. You might be someone who you show up to work, you do your job, you get paid a salary. That's great. That's hard to travel. It's hard to go somewhere else and activate a Plan B if that's what you're depending on for your income. Some professions travel more easily than others, but it's not easy, right? And then you have to get the right permission to work over there. Instead of just having permission to live there, now you need permission to get a job, which in some countries, it's one and the same. If they let you in, you can do what you like. In other countries, they might let you in to live, but you're not allowed to take a job off one of the locals. You're not allowed to be employed by somebody over there. So it becomes more complicated. Location-independent income becomes the holy grail, I guess. If you want to have a Plan B available to you, you need to have a think about how can you earn money in such a way that it doesn't matter where in the world you are. Now we have this thing called the internet. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's pretty cool. You should probably read up on it sometime. And you can do business over the internet. Obviously, lots of people do. Lots of people earn money. Keep in mind that depending on where in the world you choose to live, your cost of living might be substantially lower than what it is right now. So you're not necessarily having to think about, it costs me $80,000 a year for the family to live here in Australia, 80,000 Australian dollars a year. I have to earn $80,000 on the internet. Well, no, not necessarily. You go to other parts of the world and you'll be able to live perfectly well for $25,000, $30,000 a year. And that might be a much more achievable figure for you for an online business. Now, I'm not a business guru. I'm not going to sit here and give you business startup tips or how to do drop shipping or any of that nonsense. All that information is already out there. But these are the two things that you need to be thinking about. Now, I have no intention of activating my plan B until after the Victorian election in November 2022, right? The upcoming Victorian election. But if Daniel Andrews is re-elected and the people of Victoria decide that they like what they've seen from him and they want to give him more time, I will take that as my cue to bow out. I've been public about that for quite some time. I'm not making a secret of that. I'm not going to tie my fate to a state that wants more of that, right? And it's entirely possible that may be the result of the next election. That's possible. I hope not, but it's possible. And if that happens, then that is when I will be activating my plan B, and my family will go on an extended holiday overseas, and we will be earning our money. So I mentioned before, you can put your money into property. Another thing, a lot of people don't have the money to just drop into property, and certainly not without a big loan. And then on a loan, you pay interest, and interest is indexed to inflation. So, you could get yourself into a lot of trouble if you rack up a whole lot of debt on property, just at the start of an inflation bubble. So there are smaller things that you can put money into, and this is really what I've been focused on. So I now own some equipment that is useful to a particular industry. It's essentially heavy equipment for that industry. I own a share in it. I'm part of a consortium. We put our money in together. We bought some gear. That gear is in the hands of a management company that rents it out to clients. And that gear is now making money for us, and we're earning income. Without us, all we do is we read reports every quarter that say how many times it got rented out and what the revenue was and what our share of the revenue was, etc. Now, yes, that cost us. We had to put money in that was an investment. We had to put money in to make that happen. But now there is it was only a modest investment, and so there's an even more modest amount of money coming back to us on a semi-regular basis. These are the sorts of things where it's a double win. Number one, you're earning some return. You're earning some money on your money. Number two, your money is no longer being held in cash, and cash or cash-derived assets are not what you want to have during a period of high inflation, because it's losing value every single day. You look at whether it's Zimbabwe, you look at Liechtenstein? I think my family went through there when I was 7. And I remember going, I think it was Liechtenstein, where their inflation was so bad that when we arrived and changed our money in to when we left 3 days later and changed our money out, it had lost nearly half its value. Venezuela, I talk about a lot. I was there in 2015, and the inflation that's been happening over there. You don't want to be holding cash. You want to get your money out of cash into things that their value inflates along with the inflation, right? You can be holding, silly example, not a silly example, simple example, something like gold or silver. Okay. Now, I'm not advocating it. I'm not a financial advisor. This is an individual advice. Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. But the reason why these things are considered a hedge against inflation is because when inflation kicks in, that's the price of that thing goes up at the same time. Now, that's also true of things like heavy equipment for certain industries. It can be earning you an income, but its value is also going up because really what it is actually it's the value of the dollar is going down. That's really what's happening. So getting your money to work. So someone posted and said passive income. That's exactly what it is. Getting your money to work. That's really the priority. Don't have money sitting in the bank, and have a really, really good think about your home loan situation or your personal debt and loan situation, because you do not want to be paying off credit cards or variable interest rate home loans when interest rates hit 16% on home loans and 30% on credit cards, right? You don't want to put yourself in that position. So have a think about that, because I think that's pretty much inevitable. I think now even the big boys, the US Fed, etc., they're acknowledging inflation is rising. It's not going to be transitory. It's here to stay. That's been obvious for a few years. It's been really obvious for over a year now that we are in the beginning of that spiral. All the money printing, all the quantitative easing that's happened in the US and the money printing that's now happening in Australia, it all leads to that. So have a think about it. I can't tell you what to do, but have a think about what that means for you and what the implications of that would be for you. Okay. Yeah, so Simon's jumped in. The excavator I run is worth $300 an hour. Yeah, you get the right piece of equipment and you have the right team. So you need people that are advertising it, taking bookings, managing it, repairing it, driving it, etc. So it's not simple necessarily, but it doesn't necessarily take huge amounts of money to put into a machine or into a piece of equipment that is in demand within a certain industry. Put it into the right hands to manage that, and you can potentially make some good money. Aloha, you are more than welcome. Or Kathy, presumably, more than welcome. Benjamin says, I have unvaxxed sperm. I'm set for life. You probably have to move to the US or somewhere that allows you to sell that, because in Australia, I'm pretty sure you can't sell that. Okay, this is a common misconception. You can travel whilst unvaxxed. You can get out of Australia whilst unvaxxed. Okay. As a general rule, what you need to do is to tell the Australian government that you are going to live somewhere else for quite some time. So this is a good point from Brian Bolsh. 100%. If you can teach something, you can do a course on Udemy and start a passive income that way. And again, you don't have to be making mega bucks. You're trying to afford living in a potentially very cheap part of the world if you choose to go there. Back to Darren's question. How are you going to get there unvaxxed? On a plane? Absolutely, on a plane. I know people that have been leaving Victoria, leaving Australia, going to Mexico, going to the Caribbean, going to Eastern Europe, going to different parts of the world. There's no trouble getting out of Australia. You just have to tell the Australian government, and obviously don't lie, you have to mean it, that you're leaving long term. And it's fine. You're good. So I know someone that traveled from Australia. They left through Sydney back when you couldn't get out of Victoria. So they went to Sydney, flew out of Sydney, landed in LA, transferred from LA to, I think, somewhere in Texas, then flew out of Texas into Mexico, unjabbed. They had to take a couple of PCR tests. That was it, right? And now they're in Mexico, living it up, enjoying life, because Mexicans really couldn't care less about all this stuff, living as though none of this exists, and really enjoying themselves and earning their money online, which is what they already did. They were already set up with a location-independent income, so they were able to do that. So we're in the process of making ourselves location-independent from an income point of view. We're not there yet. Okay, but that's what we're working towards. That's the real project. Somewhere to go is relatively easy if you're willing to not be picky. If you're willing to just go, I'm just going to go somewhere, wherever that is. It's not here. I'm just going to get out, and then we'll figure it out from there. Then really, there's a lot of places in the world that you can go, and you can get a residence permit for the cost of a $5,000 US bank deposit. It's not even money spent. Understand this. You're not giving them $5,000 and it's gone. You have to put $5,000 into your bank account that you set up in their country. And all you're doing is proving to them that you're not going to be a burden on their system. And then, hey, you can stay for as long as you want. You just can't get a job, and you can't start up a local business. You can't compete with a local corner store or what have you, right? So you have to be earning your money online, or be a remote worker, a laptop worker, and you might even be able to keep your job back here in Australia, depending on the company, obviously. But there are people who are in a situation where the company doesn't care where you are. You just have to keep doing your job. If you're in that situation, well, the world is your oyster. If you're not in that situation, which we're not, then you need to start thinking about, okay, how do I take the money that I do have, that I've saved or what have you? How do I put that to work to generate an income, get it out of cash so that I'm not going to be as badly affected by the inflation when it comes? And how do I put myself in a position where we can earn enough as a family to survive in a place like rural Mexico, in a place like Nicaragua, in a place like the Dominican Republic? Again, don't be picky. But if you're willing to not be picky, there's actually a lot of places you can go. Okay. I hadn't actually seen that, Benjamin. So thank you for that information. I'll try and find out more about that. Oh, interesting. Obviously this is the country of Georgia. I'm not a super fan of being on Russia's doorstep, to be honest. I had a friend of mine who has Russian heritage, was trying to convince me that going to the Ukraine was a great idea and Kiev is an amazing city. And I said to him, well, I just think, Vladimir Putin has his eye on that part of the world. I'm not really super happy about that. He says to me, oh, no, that won't happen. There won't be an invasion, etc. Well, hold that thought, because it certainly looks like there's going to be an invasion pretty soon. Dominica, the island of Dominica, not to be confused with the Dominican Republic. Great little island. I've not been there, but I do have that on my list of places to go. And if you do want a passport, as opposed to just a residence permit, the island of Dominica is definitely one to look into. Okay, so this is a great question. Am I developing my plan B alone or do I have help? I'm doing it with my wife, which is obviously very helpful to have the support of the family. Not everyone's that lucky. But I've been using and really consuming a lot of the content from a guy called Andrew Henderson. And I'll type his website in here. It is called www.nomadcapitalist.com. I think it is. It should appear there as a comment. Nomadcapitalist.com. I'll just bring it up. He tries to appeal to like $1 million, $10 million, $100 million earners, right? I'm not in that category. But what he does, because that's his business, he's working with people up at that level. He doesn't care if he gives out a lot of information, because someone like me who's going to watch that information and put it into action myself, I was never going to be one of his clients in the first place, right? He wants the people that would rather pay money than spend time. I'm not that lucky yet. So, pardon me, if you go to nomadcapitalist.com, Andrew Henderson, he gives away an enormous amount of information. The way he does it is through videos, and there is no logical, simple pathway through his content. The key is just start watching and then keep watching, right? And you'll glean little bits here and there, and it won't make a lot of sense at first, but slowly a picture begins to emerge. So just spend time watching his stuff. Is what I would highly recommend, because he's been very, very helpful to me. And I'm now able to go and do my own research online, and I know what I'm looking for, and I know what the main pitfalls are, and I'm able to figure things out because he kind of gave me my orientation course, my crash course, and I know what I'm looking for now. So I would highly recommend Andrew Henderson, Nomad Capitalist. What's this? I'm not just coming out with negatives, but large corporations and leaving can be disrupted by vaccine mandates. Yeah, economic independence is required, 100%. And you have to have a place to go, 100%. Well, being in a laptop job and a corporate doesn't automatically mean that you're working for a corporation. I mean, yes, if that is your situation, then yeah, you need to see what your company policy is and see what all of that is. But even if you can't keep that job, that just puts you in the same situation as the rest of us, right? I don't have an employer who's going to pay me while I work on the beaches of Nicaragua, right? I have to figure out how I'm going to earn money and feed the family and so forth. And my wife is working on the same project for herself. How do we figure that out? Well, each of us has to figure that out ourselves. Never take financial advice from YouTube videos. I agree. That's why I say, don't take my advice for it. You know, this is not individual advice. You need to figure out what you want to do. Peru is interesting in some ways, not in others. But if you don't mind a very quiet way of life, Peru could be good. Just yeah, make sure you do some research. That's all I'll say. Ecuador. I like the sound of Ecuador simply because their cigars are amazing. And a cigar wrapped in Ecuadorian Connecticut shade wrapper is phenomenal. So I quite like the sound of that. Seychelles is interesting. So they remained open for business, I believe. I think I'm talking about the right place. They remained open for business all the way through all the COVID stuff. And they were, in fact, basically advertising themselves on the basis that you could come in and spend money at their resorts and everything else without having to be jabbed and what have you. What I would say is a lot of those islands, whether it's Seychelles, whether it's Mauritius, these sorts of things, your experience will vary massively if you're a tourist as opposed to a resident. So Mauritius, for example, has pretty harsh requirements on residents, not so much on the tourists, because they want the tourist dollars. They want the money coming in. So just make sure you do your research and you don't confuse their rules for a tourist versus their rules for a resident. Jessica, one of my favorite trolls, Jessica today 6, so unhelpful. I'm out. Bye. I've not been any further south in South America than Colombia and Venezuela. I've not gone further south than that. It's one of the, I've not been to the African continent. I've not been to the Antarctic, and I haven't been south of Colombia in South America. And those are 3 big things that I want to change before I die. So what do I think of Brazil? I don't know. Looks good in pictures. You lived there for 9 years. You know a lot more about it than I do, mate. So how about I reverse the question? What do you think of Brazil? Obviously, it's an amazing place. Would you live there now? Because, of course, the media have loved to pick up on the fact that, it had the most horrible experience with COVID and so many people died. There have been lockdowns there. Correct me if I'm wrong. You'll know better than I do. My understanding is that Bolsonaro kind of lost his nerve a little bit and did end up implementing a lot of lockdowns and that sort of stuff. Fill me in, because my understanding is it didn't remain an open and free paradise the way it was early on. I'm not even going to read that one out, but I'm going to put it on the screen. Dear, oh dear. Benjamin. Disgraceful. This is a reality for a lot of us, mate. And I would say, neither do we, right? My family don't have those resources. We began working over a year ago to try and put ourselves into a position where we could potentially do that. And we're still not there. We're still not there yet. There's at least another 6 months, if not 12 months ahead of us before we can get there. But there are other people that don't have the option to leave for family reasons, people that are dependent on them, any one of a number of different reasons. Some people may not be able to leave. For people in that situation, I would suggest probably just get out of the cities. That's probably a good start. If you can work a job where you don't have to be stuck in the city, that's probably not a bad improvement on your current situation. Meg makes the point, Victoria looks good in pictures. I said that Brazil looks good in pictures. Victoria does look good in pictures. Such a shame. This is another good one. The Dollar Vigilante is also good as a resource just to look into. Yeah, Ashley, I feel for you. I'm so sorry. I don't have the financial resources to not get the jab. It sucks. I have a few months to go make a decision, then decide what to do. I'm sorry. That it's so wrong. And I mean, I've been fighting to try and stop that from happening. And at this point in time, I have not succeeded. And I'm not the only one. There's lots of good people fighting tooth and nail to try and stop this. At this moment in time, we have not won that fight. I believe we will, but it's going to take a little bit of time. And for a lot of people, that time is too long. You can't just stop working. So I'm sorry. I wish there was something more meaningful that I could say, but yeah, I'm sorry. Someone mentioned Rexit. Tim Coulty's Rexit. 100%. Listen, if Rexit happened, I would move to the new Riverina state in a heartbeat. I would be there with bells on. That would be awesome if that happened. Unfortunately, it does not have a lot of momentum behind it at the moment. Get off grid, as I presume that's meant to be, as soon as possible. So I did a slow chat a while ago about essentially not prepping, but not being too vulnerable. I think there are certain precautions that most people can take in their own homes without being ridiculous. And my thesis is basically a 30-day survivability window inside your own home if all of the services stopped. Electricity, water, sewerage, gas. If the whole lot stopped, how long would it be before you had to walk out your front door looking for something because your kids are getting sick and they're desperate for water? Would be the thing for most of us, right? And I think that each and every one of us ought to have a 30-day window. We need to have inside our own home the things that we need for 30 days. And this isn't some paranoid conspiracy, whatever. This is for major storms. This is for an earthquake. Even in Melbourne, where we've not traditionally been prone to earthquakes, we've had a couple of, somewhat bigger earth tremors. Nothing big. Can we rely on nothing big ever happening? No, I think that's a bit naive to say that nothing big is ever going to happen. The example that I used when I did a slow chat all about this some time ago now, was Texas. Texas had these storms, an Arctic blast, a polar blast made it all the way down from the Arctic Circle over the rest of the United States and hit Texas. Now, the reason Texas got hit so hard was a combination of factors. Principally, among them was the fact that no one was ready for it because it's Texas. That sort of thing doesn't happen here. And it has its own separate power grid. It's not connected with the rest of the state of the United States power grids. It is its own kind of Texas power grid, most of Texas. And what happened was, because of the extreme sustained cold, things like their nuclear reactors had to shut down as a precaution, because the lakes that they use to circulate cooling water, not radioactive water, it just gets brought in, warmed up, and then let out to cool out again in this outside lake. It started to freeze. They started to get chunks of ice, and they had to shut down these nuclear reactors. The power demand was extraordinary because people are trying to heat their homes and stay alive in these freezing temperatures, living in homes that weren't designed for it. And then the whole grid went down, and the grid was down for 7 days. The estimates vary. The official estimates, I think, is 100 and something people died. The excess mortality was well in excess of 700 people over that week. 700 more people than normal died in Texas in that week, which is a statistically significant variation. It's not a massive variation, but it's a statistically significant variation. And it's pretty hard to argue that that cold snap and the power grid going down did not lead to some of those deaths. So this isn't some completely outlandish thing, but just to say, if the water stopped and the power stopped and the sewage stopped, backed up and stopped flowing for you, and the gas was gone for whatever reason, how long would it take before you had to walk out your front door looking or begging for something? Just have a think about it. I reckon 30 days is a good minimum. Latin America is fantastic, but also dangerous. It does depend on where you go. And also remember, we're coming from Australia, where we are unusually safe. We are accustomed to a level of safety that is out of the ordinary for most of the world. I really want to do that. I actually want to circumnavigate the world. I actually want to, before I die, it's on my bucket list. I want to sail around the world. But my wife gets really bad motion sickness. Yeah. So I should have asked that question before we got married. No. So unfortunately, that might never happen. But if you are someone who can handle that sort of thing, I reckon it's not necessarily the worst idea. Yeah, I agree. I think we have a perception that the rest of the world is super dangerous, and some parts definitely are. I don't disagree with the earlier comment that Central America, it can be quite dangerous in places, but it can also be very safe in other places. You do just have to pay a bit more attention to where you settle down specifically. Within, Mexico City has areas where, yeah, absolutely, you would walk around at night, no problem, and other areas where you definitely would not. Same in Colombia, same in any of the Caribbean islands, etc. You do just have to pay a bit more attention to where you choose to settle down specifically. But if you do that, then yeah. Interesting. Go to kayak.com and check the country's regulations. I assume that's to do with entry and exit, etc. Django, if you can clarify what you're talking about there, because that does sound interesting. Yep. I'm with you. Homeschooling. 100%. I was homeschooled. I'm very grateful to my parents for doing that. I consider it to be one of the greatest gifts that they gave to me. Yeah, it's having an absolute renaissance at the moment. Why don't we pull our monies and buy an old cruise ship and become pirates? Because that ship would very quickly become a living hell. The amount of work required to keep a ship afloat and running and keep engines running, and the amount of fuel they burn through, oh goodness me. Cambodia is great. Yeah, so Tell Them They're Dreaming is also one of my favorite trolls. I quite like it when he comes along, but this is actually a good question. So I stopped working full-time when, not long after my son was born, 5 years ago now, to pursue a new business in the southeast of Melbourne, something that has proved to be very difficult to get off the ground. It's a brick and mortar business. It's required a lot of planning permits, etc. That was a 3.5-year journey. Then we got dragged into VCAT by somebody who wasn't happy with the council's decision. That was 6 months. And then we ran headlong into all the COVID stuff. So unfortunately, it's ready to go. We've got all the planning permits. We've got all the building permits. We could start construction tomorrow if we wanted to. We were hoping that we would get a different result with today's legislation and that we could then proceed with confidence. I'm not so sure that we want to proceed with spending the rest of the money. So I've got investors on that project, and it's a couple of $1 million investment. And I don't know that I can, in good conscience, invest their money into a state that has Daniel Andrews at the helm. So there's a lot of big questions about what happens with that. But so that's what I've been working on. I do all this stuff a lot. As you've said, it's full time. I'm not full time, but it keeps me busy. Plus, I've been looking after the kids, and I've been doing that so that my wife can work. She's a mortgage broker. She's very good at it. She's won lots of awards, and in reality, she's been the one sustaining the family. And I've been a stay-at-home dad whilst trying to get this other business off the ground. I also have the cigar business, and I've got a couple of other things that I have. I have my finger in a number of different pies. I'm fairly entrepreneurial by nature, and that just means that I end up spreading my energies and my focus across different things, backing other people when I find people that I think are should be backed, and backing myself when I think there's something that should be backed, and selling t-shirts. At the moment, that's the main thing. I mean, 5 months ago when my wife and I decided to actually try and take all this TOFA stuff a bit more seriously, it had been basically a hobby for 11 years. I mean, as much as I've done a lot, I'd never tried to really make any money out of it. I'd never taken it seriously as any kind of a job. And then about 5 months ago, we made the decision that we would do that. I've now got a team of 4 people that help me with different things, everything from graphic design through to scheduling social media, editing my old slow chats, cutting it up into sections, as you've seen coming out on my Facebook page and my YouTube channel, and helping me with various other things. They're all part-time, but nevertheless, 4 people part-time adds up to a lot of money every month. And so paying for that's where this kind of comes in. So yeah. And then typically, because my background is film and television, the other thing, and this is obviously important, I probably should have led with this, I tend to pick up a couple of big contracts every year, producing, writing, directing something for whether it's a TV commercial or a series of corporate videos or whatever it may be. So over the course of a year, I'll pick up 2 or 3 contracts, and between those 2 or 3 contracts, I'll make $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. And then I'll eke out some other money doing other smaller things at various times. So in any given year, I tend to earn probably 60 plus, 60 to 70 grand, somewhere there. And I'm able to do that whilst being a stay-at-home dad and whilst working on other things that I'm passionate about. Excuse me. And in conjunction with what my wife earns, that keeps us afloat. And that's how we've been living for the last sort of 5 years. Ba-ba-bum. There's obviously a lot of chats happening where people are going backwards and forwards. So I'm not going to try and decipher any of that. Yeah, I'm sorry. No money to leave, no money coming in. My family is fucked. Yeah, I'm sorry. I wish I could help with that, but yeah, I can't. All right. Well, guys, I'm going to call it a night because we've been going for 2 hours and 20 minutes. I really appreciate you joining me. Today's obviously been a big, disappointing day for a lot of us. What did I say about a Russian invasion? Russia is currently massing lots of troops along the border with Ukraine. That might be an intimidation tactic. They do that sort of thing from time to time. It might be in preparation for an actual invasion. Who knows? Hello from Texas, watching closely. Keep a seat warm for me, would you, Carol? Texas or Florida, if I can get there. Hey, Nat, I'm finished. I'm about to go. So, sorry. Veronica, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate that you choose to spend your evening here with me. I do appreciate that. So listen, guys, we've spent the last half of tonight, or last 40 minutes talking about Plan B. But Plan B is Plan B for a reason. Plan A is to get active, start fighting, make sure that these next 2 elections go down in history as the elections that change the course of the future of Australia. We need to get good people into that position of crossbench in both the Senate and in the House of Representatives federally. That election is coming up somewhere, most likely April, but March to May of next year. That election is coming up. Sign up, become a financial member of whichever freedom-loving minor party you believe best deserves your support. For me, my choice is the Liberal Democrats, not to be confused with the Liberal National Party, totally different thing. Your choice is whatever your choice is. Get behind them, become a paid member, volunteer, do the footwork. Do the footwork for them because that's what they need, right? Let's make sure, even if we do end up activating Plan Bs because things don't work out at the election in November. Oops. Thanks, Matthew. Texas, open our house for us Victorians. There'll be a few. Yes, Texas, open your house. And maybe do Texit. Do Texit first. Get out of the US so you don't have that federal government over hanging over your heads, and then I'll come. But guys, let's get engaged. Don't sit on the sidelines. The protests have been fantastic. We've done some really amazing things. I went through that earlier in this slow chat. If you missed that, go back, because it's worth remembering that our efforts so far have not been in vain. We haven't had the result we wanted today, but our efforts have not been in vain. And we've built a platform that we can build from to move forward from here. Let's keep doing that. Let's keep working. Let's keep fighting. And if the day comes that I'm sitting here on November, whatever the day is, and Daniel Andrews has become our premier again, then I'll be doing a slow chat to say, okay, guys, I'm out. I'm activating my Plan B. My family are going to be working on getting away out of the country, at least for a time. But until then, I'm here and I'm fighting tooth and nail and trying to make sure that that day never comes. And I hope that you'll join me. Thank you very much for your time tonight. I hope to see you on Saturday. I hope to see you even more in Ballarat on Sunday. Stay well, stay free. I'll see you then.